Are you in it to win it? And what do I even mean by that? Hi, my name is Lauren, and this channel is called Lauren Fosters, where we talk about all things foster care and adoption related. I am former foster youth myself, so I have been in the foster care system, and also I am the parent to 10 awesome kids, 6 of whom are adopted out of the foster care system, and I'm a military spouse. So we've adopted in a few different states now, so all of my videos are from the perspective of all those things, through the lens of all those things, if that makes sense. And so the question today is, are you in it to win it? And what on earth do I even mean by that? Rehoming kids is a sad, sad reality for the foster care system because foster care retention is super duper hard. Foster parents get burned out, and maybe you're a foster parent who's been burned out and you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a tough world, and I don't say that if you're new here, welcome. It's so nice to see you. If you're new to the foster care system, this video isn't there to scare you, but the foster care world can be hard. There is a lot of complicated factors. The need for foster care is born out of something that is hard. Kids getting removed from situations that are potentially scary or dangerous, kids getting removed wrongfully, kids getting removed because they were being abused or neglected. There's so much to these stories that, once again, this can be a very complicated world to live in. I always say that foster parenting, adopting is special needs parenting. So a lot of times when you read stories about people that are special needs parenting, a lot of us foster parents and adoptive parents can relate to those stories because that's a world we live in as well. I think step one is knowing your why of why you're getting into foster care. So I see a lot of people get into foster care because they want to adopt, whether that be because they can't have biological children, whether it be because maybe they can't afford domestic or international adoption and they've always wanted to adopt, or whatever the case may be. I do see a lot of people getting into foster care to adopt. Now, I don't want to discourage that because that is not an impossibility. But once again, a reminder, I've said this on several of my videos, the primary goal of foster care is reunification. So we always want to root for that. We always want to see it happen when it's safe and when it's possible, that children get reunified with their parents. That's the goal. So knowing your why behind why you want to be a foster parent in the first place is so important. And hey, if it's that you want to adopt, that's fine, but make sure that your agency understands that up front, because their goal is going to be to support that child through reunification if that becomes possible. And that might be frustrating to some parents because they say, how can you get, here's a question I hear a lot, how can you get so attached to a child? The child's lived with you for so long and then they just get ripped away? Well, let's remember that these children were already ripped away from another parent's hands, whether that be another foster parent or whether that be their biological parent or another caregiver. These children have already been removed by the time they've come into your home. So I'll be honest, it can be super duper hard when you get attached to a child and that child gets removed. But once again, knowing when we got into this whole foster care world, we knew that it was very likely that children were gonna be reunified. So we had to root for that, and not because we were gonna get in trouble if we didn't, but because, I mean, ultimately that's kind of the idea, right? Like, kids get into foster care and parents are able to plead their case. Maybe they did nothing wrong. You just never know. I know that to be a true story for a good friend of mine. Maybe they did nothing wrong, or maybe there was something going on that they are able to work through to get reunified with the children. So we always have to root for that. And yeah, that might mean I get my heart broken from time to time, but I want you to hear this. It is worth getting my heart broken over and over again to make sure that kids have a safe place to be while their biological parents or caregivers or whoever they were removed from sort things out. Like, I'm willing to take that hit over and over again for the sake of these kids. So let's talk a little bit about foster parent burnout. One of the reasons a foster parent could get burnt out is because the agency is maybe stepping outside of the parameters of what or who they've agreed to take in as a foster child. So what I mean by that is, and I use this example a lot, but let's say a foster home is geared towards teen girls, all right? And the foster care agency keeps calling and saying, hey, we have this 5-year-old little boy that needs a home. That may not be an appropriate placement for that child if that family is not set up for that. So one reason that foster parents could get burnt out is just because an agency keeps calling and kind of pushing them to move the lines of what they've agreed to. And I do want to say, I think that it's totally fair for a foster parent to say, hey, like, we didn't agree to that. And I don't think an agency should hold that against the foster home. I think, you know, if you only take infants and you've got cribs and toddler toys everywhere, maybe you shouldn't be taking a teenager, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean you can't. This is a good time to insert that there are lots of people that say that they will take emergency placements over the weekend while they find a more appropriate home and that kind of thing. But once again, having those clear boundaries with your agency and saying like, hey, this is what I've agreed to, this is what I'm sticking to, and being okay to say no if you get the call. And that's just not something that's going to work for your family. Like, and maybe it's not even just for your own well-being, but maybe for that child's well-being, that it not be appropriate that they're in a home that just isn't geared towards them. And of course, a lot of times you're going to get the sob story from the agency, but we have nowhere to put this child, and it'll just be for a weekend. And some of y'all know that they will stretch that out. So I think, you know, be very clear. A lot of us get into this because we have hearts that want to help, and so it's really hard to say no in those situations. And you know, and I've seen a lot of short-term placements turn into long-term placements that way, and a lot of parents that would say, I would never look back, I'm so glad that this kid came into my home. So if you're willing to move those lines, good for you. But if you're not, hey, tell your agency that up front. Another little point on agencies, like to add on to the making sure you have clear boundaries thing, is and this is just a little side note, don't be surprised if your agency has something called a paper pregnancy, or they encourage you to take your time getting licensed. The reason behind that is they want to, once again, make sure you're in it to win it. They want you to make sure that you understand this process, you understand what you're getting into. They have you taking these classes throughout your licensing process, and they want to make sure that you understand the full scope of what you're actually walking into, because what they would hate to have happen is to walk through this whole process with you and say, and have you go, you know what, I'm done. Nope, absolutely not. They want to make sure that you understand what you're getting into, what these kids have maybe experienced, what these kids have maybe seen, what parenting these children might look like for you. And so don't feel so rushed, I think, to like get quickly through the process, okay? So make sure on that level that you are in it to win it. Like, it's okay to take your time. I know some people, like military people like me, we're always in a hurry because we're not anywhere very long, but take your time. Especially if you're like on the fence about literally anything, take your time until you're sure, and then move forward in the process. Another big reason that foster parents can be burnt out is just the placements themselves. Placements are hard. These kids come from very, 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 very hard places sometimes, and that can come with a plethora of other things. A lot of mental health concerns, maybe medical needs that you weren't prepared for, behavioral issues maybe you weren't prepared for, and that's where good trauma training comes in. I really do think good agencies will make sure that parents have really good trauma training. I know that most of them that I've ever seen have some sort of trauma training before you even get licensed. They will start maybe kind of brushing over what that would look like for you. Usually those classes are mandatory as part of getting training. I would, as a parent, seek out further trauma training. Look into TBRI, look for connected parenting, the connected child, the whole brain child. Some of these things I'm throwing out there, maybe I'll make another video about some other time, but just kind of look up some of these things online. There's some books, there's videos. If you Google Dr. Karen Purvis, may she rest in peace. She has some of the most amazing videos out of her working with children who come from trauma, and some great advice for those of us who are where the rubber meets the road with those children every day and implementing some of those things at home. But I will tell you, if I didn't seek further training outside of just what my agency was offering, I don't think I would be okay as a foster parent. And if my husband was in this video, I think he would tell you the same thing. If you seek out further training, you're gonna be more equipped. You just are. And if you're more equipped, you're gonna be less likely to burn out. I think lack of support is another huge reason foster parents burn out. I can't stress enough how important it is to find your people. I do have a video about that, finding your community. Here's the deal. There's stuff that us as foster parents, adoptive parents go through that no one else will understand, ever. Like the most well-meaning, loving friend, the person you've known for 20, 30 years, the closest family member you have, if they're not part of this world, they're not gonna get it. They're gonna really try. Their heart's gonna want to get it, but they're not gonna get it. And that's when it's so important to have that friend that you can call in the middle of the night and just fall apart with. That's when it's so important. Being military, I have friends, there's about 5 of us or so that still to this day, even though we haven't been stationed together in years, we message each other all the time and support each other and lift each other up. We're just part of a little group chat, and it's our little support system from a distance to have these kind of really hard conversations that really no one else is going to understand. So looking for support groups, look in your area, see if they're out there. I know a lot of churches have support groups, and maybe you're saying, well, but I'm not a religious person. I don't want to be forced into that kind of thing. I've noticed a lot of the support groups that happen through churches aren't necessarily religion based. So check them out at least. It's worth finding some of your people that way. And of course, there may be some support groups through your agency or just private support groups, but finding your people and knowing other people that are going through this, so helpful. It's game changing, and I really do think it helps with foster parent retention. So if you're an agency out there, a little tip, I would suggest maybe trying to find a way to create these support groups, maybe without you involved, because I think that foster parents need to vent and say things with each other that they don't maybe want their agency to hear. And that sounds horrible. Not because they're sitting and bad-mouthing you, because that's not what support groups are for, but supporting each other, or at least just having some sort of like forum or way that people can get together outside of the agency itself, because I have seen events thrown by agencies and then people are awkward, and you know, you might go, oh, nice to meet you, and never talk to that other foster parent again. But I mean, the support groups where foster parents have come together that I've been able to be part of, where we can really be real and speak our minds, and really get down to the nitty-gritty of topics, I think that is so helpful. So agencies, if that's something you all could figure out, I would heavily suggest if you want to work on foster parent retention, work on them supporting each other. Lastly, I can't stress therapy enough, both for your kids, and I don't even just mean your foster kids. You could, maybe your biological kids need therapy, but also for yourself. There have been times, seasons where I have sought out my own therapy. There have been seasons where my husband and I have done couples therapy, so we can just kind of work on our relationship as we're walking through this as a couple. All my foster kids have, and now adoptive kids, have gone to therapy or still go to therapy. And I've had I've had two biological children also go to their own therapy because they needed a sounding board to kind of speak their own mind, to kind of get out of the crazy of our world and just kind of have their own mental health check. I know that's just another thing to add to your very busy schedule, because chances are if you're in this world, you're crazy busy, but it is so worth it. And I've said game changer already once in this video, but I'm gonna say game changer again. I really think therapy, I know therapy is a game changer. It's worked in my life. Once again, I'm former foster youth. Therapy is not something that is mandatory for me to exist, but I will tell you my life is usually a lot more put together when I have that available and that I'm regularly going to therapy. And so I can't suggest it enough. I think sometimes we think we got it together. I don't need it. I'm not like, you know, going off the deep end. Okay, maybe you're not, but having somebody that's kind of like outside of your sphere, that's a mental health professional and really can get to the behind the scenes of who you are as a human being and help you work on some of those things, so important. And there's also therapists out there that do family therapy. That's an incredible option if it's something that you all need to work on together as a family, having a therapist that either comes to your home or somewhere where you can go and kind of go as a family and just like talk about like, how are we going to work on this dynamic. Some of the best therapy my children have received are therapy where not only do they go as an individual and they can kind of work on their stuff alone with their therapist, but with that therapist also inviting me in as a parent so we can work on certain things together, that not only that we have activities that are therapeutic in office, but also therapeutic activities that we can take away, kind of like homework. So look for a therapist that's willing to work with you as a parent. This shouldn't just be a drop-off situation and you're gonna get your kid back and your kid's gonna be all better. That's not how I think good therapy works. I mean, I'm not an expert, so take that with a grain of salt. But I do think that anytime I've been invited in to be part of the process from time to time, because obviously the kid needs time to like have a private moment with them as well. But when I've been invited into that process, I think I've noticed a huge shift in my kids. And oh boy, behaviors. That being another huge burnout moment for foster parents. I realize I kind of already touched on that as far as like just placements being hard. But a lot of times what we see when we talk about behaviors, and this is why it's so important to look into trauma training, because a lot of times those behaviors, there's a reason behind those behaviors. That's another conversation. That's a whole video on its own, or a video series on its own even. But if we can find out what is making this kid tick, like what's behind these behaviors, like maybe this child has undiagnosed anxiety, maybe this child has undiagnosed depression, maybe this child has something going on that they can't help. Like maybe this child has ADHD. You know, you can't punish ADHD. ADHD isn't something a child can control. So knowing what the reason behind the behavior is so important. I think once we know the name of our giants, sometimes it's easier to face those giants, but we can't do that without help. So making sure we have those mental health experts in our lives, helping us figure those things out and helping us navigate those things, getting good trauma training, so helpful. Anyway, foster mom, foster dad, I hope this was encouraging to you. I know getting burnt out and and just wanting to give up is such a real feeling and thing. I know that probably all of us have thought it at some point, so if you thought it, don't beat yourself up. We've probably all been down that road to some degree at some point. Be encouraged that you're not in it alone, and if it is feeling lonely, once again, finding that community. If you really can't, look, you got community here. You got Lauren Foster, so feel free to tell us your story down below. And I say that with all genuine sincerity because I do read the comments, and I hope that you guys are encouraged to read the comments and support one another, lift each other up, use that as a space to say something encouraging to someone else who may be struggling. And if you are struggling, don't be afraid to say you're struggling. We would love to try to lift you up and encourage you. Maybe you're a seasoned foster parent and you have some really great advice for somebody. Throw that down in the comment section so someone else can read it and hopefully be lifted up. Anyway, I hope all that helps, and I will see you next time. All right, bye.